Most people remember the day they found love. Caleb Morgan remembered the day he found 3 terrified children standing inside a wall of fire. For 10 years. He believed that was the end of the story. He had no idea. It was only the beginning. Arizona Territory. Late summer, 1878. The afternoon sun baked the rocky hills until the air shimmered above the desert floor. Dust drifted across narrow wagon trails. Mesquite trees barely moved beneath a dry western breeze. 25-year-old Caleb Morgan guided a small herd of cattle toward his ranch outside Red Willow Canyon. Life had never given him very much. A modest cabin. 40 head of cattle. 1 aging horse named Dusty. And a reputation for helping anyone stranded along the frontier. Most evenings. He ate supper alone. Most mornings. He worked before sunrise. The quiet never bothered him. He believed a peaceful life was wealth enough. As Dusty climbed a rocky ridge, Caleb suddenly noticed something unusual. A thick column of black smoke climbed into the clear blue sky. Not the steady smoke from a campfire. Not the controlled burn used by ranchers. This smoke rolled violently. Something was burning. Badly. Caleb immediately pulled the reins. Dusty snorted nervously. The horse had smelled danger before Caleb had seen it. Without another thought, Caleb urged him toward the canyon. The closer they came, the stronger the smell became. Burned wood. Burned leather. Gunpowder. Then. Voices. Shouting echoed between the canyon walls. A freight wagon burned fiercely beside a narrow trail. Several dead horses lay scattered nearby. Boxes of food and blankets had been thrown across the rocks. Fresh bullet holes marked the wagon's wooden sides. Whatever had happened, it had ended only moments earlier. Caleb scanned the canyon. No attackers. No survivors. At least, that was what he believed. Then, he heard it. A frightened scream. High-pitched. Young. Coming from behind the burning wagon. He ran. Heat slammed into his face. Flames stretched several feet into the air. The fire blocked almost every path. Through the smoke, he finally saw them. 3 Apache girls. The oldest held both younger sisters. Behind her. She couldn't have been older than 15. Her buckskin dress had been scorched along one sleeve. Ash covered her face. Yet she still stood between danger and her sisters. Beside her, a quieter girl clutched a small leather medicine pouch against her chest. She looked only 13. Even now, she watched the fire carefully instead of crying. The youngest, no more than 10 years old, sat frozen on the ground. Tears streamed across her dusty cheeks. She couldn't move. She couldn't even speak. The flames had trapped all 3 against a sandstone wall. Caleb looked around quickly. The fire spread too fast. Going around wasn't possible. There was only one way through. Straight into it. He grabbed a wool blanket from the overturned wagon. Nearby, a wooden barrel had split open. Water poured slowly across the ground. Caleb shoved the blanket into the muddy water until every inch became soaked. He wrapped it around his shoulders. Then looked directly at the oldest girl. "When I reach you, don't argue. Just follow me." She nodded immediately. There wasn't time for fear. Only trust. Caleb took one deep breath. Then charged through the flames. The heat became unbearable almost instantly. Smoke burned his eyes. Sparks landed across his sleeves. The wet blanket protected him. Barely. Within seconds, he reached the girls. The little one first. The oldest girl lifted her youngest sister without hesitation. Caleb pulled the frightened child into his arms. "Stay close." He motioned for the other two. Together, they pushed back through the fire. Halfway across, a burning wagon wheel collapsed. The impact scattered blazing wood across the ground. One burning beam crashed directly in front of them. The youngest girl screamed. Caleb kicked the burning timber aside, then carried her over it without slowing down. Moments later, all four stumbled into the shallow creek beside the trail. Cold water hissed against smoking boots. Everyone collapsed to their knees. Alive. For only a moment. Relief settled across the canyon. Then, a rifle fired. The bullet struck a rock beside Caleb's head. Someone had returned. He immediately looked uphill. One outlaw rode back toward the burning wagon. The man's face remained hidden beneath a dark hat. He spotted the girls, then reached for another cartridge. Caleb pushed the three sisters behind a large boulder. "Stay down." The outlaw raised his rifle again. Caleb fired first. His shot struck the man's saddle. The frightened horse reared violently. The outlaw recovered quickly. Another shot echoed. Pain exploded across Caleb's left side. The bullet grazed his ribs before disappearing into the rocks. He staggered. Nearly fell. The outlaw smiled. Then calmly aimed once more. Before he could fire, a gunshot cracked from behind Caleb. The outlaw froze. A bullet struck the dirt directly in front of his horse. The frightened animal bolted away. The rider cursed, then disappeared into the canyon without looking back. Caleb turned around. The oldest Apache girl still held his Winchester. Her hands trembled. Smoke drifted from the barrel. She had never tried to hit the outlaw. She only needed him to leave. Caleb slowly smiled. That was smart. She lowered the rifle. "My father says a missed shot can still save a life." Caleb nodded. "Your father sounds wiser than most men I know." The sun disappeared behind the western cliffs. Traveling after dark would be dangerous. Caleb led the three sisters toward a small cave hidden beneath a rocky overhang. The opening was narrow, easy to miss. Inside, the cave stayed cool, dry, safe. He gathered cedar branches, started a small fire, cooked the last of his dried beef, then divided every piece into 4 equal portions. The youngest girl quietly pushed part of hers back toward Caleb. "You were shot." He smiled gently. "I've had worse." She looked unconvinced. Still, she accepted his answer. For the first time all day, the little girl smiled. "My name is Sonny." Caleb tipped his hat. "It's nice to meet you." The older girl spoke next. "I'm Nita." She rested one protective arm around the quiet middle sister. "This is Kiona." Kiona offered a respectful nod. "I have medicine." She carefully opened the leather pouch she had protected through the fire. Inside rested crushed herbs wrapped in soft cloth. She gently cleaned Caleb's wound, applied the herbs, then wrapped fresh bandages around his side. Her movements were calm, precise, far steadier than many frontier doctors Caleb had met. "You've done this before." Kiona looked down shyly. "My grandmother teaches me. She's an excellent teacher." 2 days passed. Caleb remained with the sisters. He refused to leave until he knew they were safe. Together, they gathered water, collected firewood, watched the canyon trails. Late on the second afternoon, a distant eagle call echoed through the rocks. Nita instantly stood. They found us. Within minutes. Several Apache riders entered the canyon. Leading them was a tall warrior whose face carried equal measures of fear and hope. The moment he saw the three girls alive, his shoulders collapsed with relief. He embraced each daughter without speaking. Then walked directly toward Caleb. For several long seconds, neither man said a word. Finally, the warrior placed one hand over his own heart. Then gently rested it on Caleb's shoulder. "My name is Matto. You saved everything that matters to me." Caleb shook his head. "They saved each other. I only arrived at the right moment." Matto looked toward his daughters. Then back to Caleb. "Our family has an old promise. A life given must one day be returned." Caleb smiled politely. "They don't owe me anything. They owe themselves a long life." Matto answered softly. "One day, my daughters will return. Our family never forgets." Caleb believed he understood. He thought the warrior meant gratitude. Nothing more. Before leaving, little Sonny ran back toward him. She placed a small leather cord into his hand. 3 polished turquoise stones hung from it. 1 large. 1 medium. 1 small. "So you won't forget us." Caleb looked at the necklace. Then at the 3 sisters. "I don't think that's possible." 10 years passed. The little ranch outside Red Willow Canyon had grown. The cabin was larger. The cattle herd had doubled. Dusty had become older. Caleb's hair carried the first signs of adulthood rather than youth. But one thing never changed. The leather cord with 3 turquoise stones still hung around his neck. Most days, he barely remembered why he still wore it. Until one quiet autumn morning, the sound of approaching horses echoed across the town. People stepped onto wooden sidewalks. Store owners paused their work. Children stopped playing. A small Apache delegation rode calmly into Red Willow. At its center, 3 breathtaking young women dismounted. The first carried herself with quiet confidence. The second wore a healer's medicine pouch across her shoulder. The youngest smiled warmly as though greeting old friends. Caleb stared. Something about their eyes felt familiar. The tallest woman stepped forward. "You once carried me through fire." Caleb's eyes widened. "Nita." She smiled. Beside her, Kiona nodded gently. Sonny laughed. "We told you. You wouldn't forget us." The entire street fell silent. Nita looked directly into Caleb's eyes. "Our father made a promise 10 years ago. We have returned to honor it." Kiona took one step forward. "Our family has fulfilled every part of that promise." Then Sonny spoke the words that froze the entire town. "We have come to marry you." Not a single sound remained on Main Street. Cowboys stared in disbelief. Storekeepers stopped breathing. Even Dusty lifted his head. Caleb looked at the 3 women he had once carried through fire. Then quietly answered with one word. "No." Nita's smile disappeared. Pain flashed across her face. She slowly rested one hand on the handle of the knife hanging at her belt. Not as a threat, but as someone trying to steady a heart that had just been broken. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you refusing us? Because we are Apache?" No one spoke. The entire street seemed to forget how to breathe. The wind carried dust between the wooden buildings. Somewhere, a loose sign creaked above the general store. Caleb looked at Nita. Then at Kiona. Then at Sonny. He saw confusion. Embarrassment. Pain. Not anger. That hurt him more than anything. He slowly removed his hat. His voice remained calm. I'm not refusing you. I'm refusing the reason you came. None of the three women answered. Neither did anyone else. The silence stretched until Caleb finally spoke again. If you truly want to understand, please come with me. Instead of arguing in the middle of the street, Caleb led the Apache delegation toward the small wooden church standing at the edge of town. The pastor quietly unlocked the doors before anyone even asked. Within minutes, the church filled with people. Apache elders sat on one side. Ranchers and townsfolk filled the other. Everyone wanted to hear the explanation. At the front, Caleb placed something on the old wooden table. A faded leather cord. 3 polished turquoise stones still hung from it. The sunlight passing through the stained glass window reflected softly across the blue stones. Sonny's eyes widened. You still have it. Caleb smiled gently. I've worn it every day. For 10 years. Kiona stared at the necklace in silence. Nita lowered her eyes. For the first time, she realized he had never forgotten them. Not even once. Caleb rested one hand on the necklace. When I found you, you were children. I didn't risk my life because I expected anything in return. He looked toward the townspeople. Then toward the Apache elders. I wanted 3 frightened girls to grow up. Nothing more. His eyes returned to the sisters. If your future belongs to me. Then I failed. The church became completely silent. Caleb continued. I didn't save your lives. So one day, your lives could become payment. Across the room, their father, Matto, slowly stood. Time had changed him. His black hair had become streaked with silver. The proud warrior now carried the quiet weight of age. For several moments, he struggled to find the right words. Finally, he spoke. When my wife died, my daughters were still young. I feared I might lose them too. He looked toward Caleb. When you brought them back to me, I believed no gift could ever equal what you had done. He paused. Our family has an old tradition. A life saved must someday be repaid. He closed his eyes briefly. I thought marriage was the greatest honor I could offer. His voice softened. I never asked whether that honor had become a burden. Caleb walked toward Matto. No father should apologize for loving his daughters. But love cannot decide another person's future. Matto slowly nodded. The word struck him harder than any weapon ever had. Caleb turned toward the 3 sisters. He spoke to Nita first. You've traveled hundreds of miles. You crossed mountains. You came because your father made a promise. He stepped closer. If that promise had never existed, would you still be standing here today? Nita opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She respected him. Admired him. She had imagined him countless times during the past decade. But did she truly know the man standing before her? Not really. She remembered a hero. She didn't yet know Caleb Morgan. For the first time, she realized there was a difference. Caleb faced Kiona. You've become a healer. She nodded quietly. My grandmother finished my training. What do you dream about? The question surprised her. My dream? Yes. If tomorrow belonged only to you, what would you do? Kiona looked toward the window. Sunlight touched the medicine pouch hanging at her side. She smiled faintly. I would build a place where Apache children and settler children could both receive treatment. So no mother would care which language the healer spoke. Caleb smiled. That sounds like a beautiful dream. Then he looked at Sonny. The youngest sister still carried the same lively curiosity she had shown as a child. You always asked questions. She laughed softly. I still do. What do you want? She answered almost immediately. I want children to grow up without fearing each other. I want Apache children to learn English. And settler children to learn Apache. So no one grows up believing stories that aren't true. Her eyes sparkled. I think that's possible. Caleb looked at all three women. You each have your own future. You each have your own calling. If I marry any of you today, before you choose that future for yourselves, then I become another man deciding your lives. He slowly shook his head. I won't do that. His voice grew firmer. Not to women. Not to anyone. The church remained silent. Many of the older ranchers lowered their eyes. Even the pastor smiled. Quietly. Because everyone understood. The cowboy had not rejected three women. He had protected their freedom. Nita finally spoke. So, if one day I came back, not because my father asked me to, not because I owed you, but because I chose you. She searched his face carefully. Would your answer still be no? Caleb looked into her eyes. Long enough for the entire room to wonder what he would say. Finally, he answered honestly. I don't know. Because we haven't truly met yet. You know the man who carried you through fire. I know the girl I carried. He smiled gently. We deserve the chance to meet each other for the first time. Something inside Nita shifted. The disappointment remained. But another feeling quietly replaced it. Hope. That afternoon, the three sisters stayed at Caleb's ranch. Not as brides. Not as guests bound by obligation. Simply as friends. Caleb moved into the old barn with Dusty. He offered the cabin to the sisters. When Sonny protested. You'll freeze out here. Caleb laughed. I've survived worse. Then he looked toward all three women. I don't want anyone saying a single unkind thing about your honor. The gesture spread quickly through town. Even the women who had doubted Caleb began whispering among themselves. He really meant what he said. He respects them. Over the following days, life settled into a quiet rhythm. Nita naturally joined Caleb with the cattle. She handled difficult horses with remarkable confidence. One stubborn Mustang threw 2 ranch hands before breakfast. Nita approached without shouting. Without force. Within minutes. The horse lowered its head. Caleb watched from across the corral. You've done this before. She smiled. My grandfather believed frightened animals listen before they obey. Caleb chuckled. So did my father. They exchanged an amused look. It was the first conversation they had ever shared. Not as rescuer and rescued. But simply. As two adults. Meanwhile, Kiona treated a young ranch boy bitten by a rattlesnake. The local doctor believed the boy would lose his leg. Kiona quietly prepared crushed herbs. Controlled the swelling. Stopped the infection. Before nightfall, the boy survived. Word spread rapidly. By the next morning, settlers who had once avoided Apache camps were waiting outside the ranch asking for Kiona's help. Sonny found another purpose. She gathered children beneath the large cottonwood tree every afternoon. She taught Apache words for river, horse, sky, family. Then taught English words in return. Soon, the children laughed together. They stopped noticing which side of the valley each child came from. Watching everything from the edge of town. One man frowned. Silas Crow. owner of the largest trading company in Red Willow. The richest businessman within 50 miles. Silas had spent years trying to buy the Apache spring that supplied fresh water to the valley. The tribe had refused every offer. Now, the friendship growing between Caleb and the Apache threatened everything. Silas smiled coldly. If they won't divide themselves, I'll help them. That evening, several men gathered inside the saloon. Silas bought every round of whiskey. Then spoke just loudly enough for others to hear. Funny thing. 3 Apache women arrive. They're living on Caleb's ranch. And suddenly the tribe has friends in town. One cowboy frowned. What are you saying? Silas shrugged. Nothing. Just wondering whether Caleb plans to hand this valley over. One wedding at a time. The rumor spread before sunrise. By noon, half the town believed Caleb was secretly helping the Apache claim local land. Exactly as Silas intended. 3 nights later, Sonny stepped outside the cabin to enjoy the cool evening air. Something moved near the old wooden bridge crossing Willow Creek. She frowned. 2 unfamiliar riders crouched beneath the bridge. One of them carried a small crate. The other struck a match. A thin fuse began burning toward several sticks of dynamite tied beneath the main support beam. At that exact moment, the distant sound of wagon wheels echoed along the trail. A church wagon carrying nearly a dozen children was approaching the bridge. Sonny's face turned pale. She spun toward the ranch. Caleb. Her terrified scream shattered the night. Caleb burst from the barn. Nita and Kiona ran from the cabin. Across the valley, the burning fuse continued creeping toward the explosives. And the children's wagon kept rolling closer. Unaware that every second brought them nearer to disaster. Sonny didn't wait for anyone to answer. She ran. Her boots pounded across the frozen dirt. The bridge. They're blowing up the bridge. Caleb was already reaching for his rifle. Nita vaulted onto her horse in one smooth motion. Kiona grabbed her medicine satchel before anyone could tell her to. Within seconds, 4 riders thundered into the darkness. The church wagon had nearly reached Willow Creek. Children laughed inside. They had no idea death waited beneath the wooden planks. The burning fuse hissed quietly. Only 20 feet remained. Caleb urged Dusty harder. Stop the wagon. Sonny cut across the meadow instead of following the road. She knew she was faster on open ground. As she reached the front of the bridge, she waved both arms. Turn around. The driver pulled desperately on the reins. The frightened horses screamed. The heavy wagon slid sideways. One wheel hung over the edge. But it stopped. Barely. Meanwhile, Caleb and Nita jumped from their horses. The fuse had almost reached the dynamite. There are 3 charges. Nita spotted them immediately. 2 on this side. 1 underneath. Caleb cut the first fuse. Nita ripped the second bundle loose. The third remained beneath the center support. Too low. Too dangerous. Without hesitation, Nita wrapped a rope around her waist. Tie me. Caleb looked at her. The bridge isn't stable. I know. Do it. There wasn't time to argue. He secured the rope around an old timber. Nita climbed beneath the bridge. The burning fuse glowed only inches away. She stretched farther. The wood beneath her boots cracked. She ignored it. Her knife sliced through the fuse. The flame died. 1 heartbeat later, the rotten support beam snapped. Nita fell. The rope jerked violently. Caleb planted both boots into the dirt. His injured shoulder screamed with pain. Still, He refused to let go. With every ounce of strength. He pulled. Slowly. Nita climbed back onto the bridge. The two simply looked at one another. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The children were safe. But the night wasn't over. Caleb examined the dynamite. This wasn't random. Someone wanted innocent people to die. Sonny pointed toward fresh hoofprints disappearing into the hills. I saw 2 riders. Caleb knelt beside the tracks. They wanted us to blame the Apache. Nita finished the thought. And the town would blame us. Silas hadn't tried to destroy a bridge. He had tried to destroy trust. The following morning, Red Willow exploded with rumors. Before Caleb could speak, Silas stepped into the town square. I warned everyone. The Apache have brought trouble. Several frightened ranchers nodded. Then, Sheriff Owen interrupted. We found something. He held up a broken wooden crate recovered beneath the bridge. Burned across one side was the trading company's brand. Silas Crow Trading. Every face slowly turned toward Silas. For the first time, the wealthy merchant looked nervous. Silas smiled. A thief must have stolen one of my crates. No one answered. The sheriff frowned. I'd like to believe that. But we'll keep looking. Silas realized suspicion had begun shifting toward him. He needed one final move. That night, he kidnapped Sonny. Caleb discovered her empty room just before midnight. Only one thing remained behind. A torn piece of buckskin. Pinned to the table with a hunting knife. Meet me at the abandoned mill. Come alone. Or the girl dies. Nita reached for her rifle. We're going. Caleb stopped her. No. He expects us to lose control. Kiona quietly unfolded an old survey map. My grandfather once showed me this. She pointed beneath the abandoned mill. There's an old irrigation tunnel. It leads beneath the floor. Sonny wasn't helpless. She still carried the tiny blade hidden inside her braided hair. The same emergency knife Caleb had taught all 3 sisters to keep 10 years earlier. Caleb smiled. Then we don't rescue Sonny. We help her rescue herself. An hour later, Silas waited inside the abandoned mill. His pistol rested against Sonny's shoulder. You should have accepted their proposal. He laughed bitterly. You would have stayed out of my business. Outside, Caleb walked toward the front door alone. Exactly as Silas demanded. What Silas didn't know. Nita already waited above the rafters. Kiona had quietly filled the room with smoke from burning cedar and sage. Visibility dropped. Sonny slowly cut through the ropes around her wrists. The moment her hands came free, she kicked over the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Silas fired wildly. Nita dropped from the ceiling. Caleb burst through the doorway. Sheriff Owen and 3 deputies emerged through the tunnel behind them. Within seconds, Silas found himself surrounded. He slowly lowered the pistol. It's over. The sheriff placed him in handcuffs. The conspiracy had ended. Without another shot. Without another death. Several days later, the entire valley gathered beneath the giant cottonwood tree. Apache families stood beside ranchers. For the first time. Not across from each other. Together. Maddow stepped forward. Age had bent his shoulders. But his voice remained steady. He looked first toward his daughters. Then toward Caleb. I owe all of you an apology. He removed the ceremonial feather hanging from his necklace. My promise was made from gratitude. But gratitude should never become obligation. He faced his daughters. From this day forward, You owe no man your future. You owe only your own heart. Then. He turned toward Caleb. I release you from my promise. Caleb smiled softly. You never held me. You only loved your daughters. The two men embraced. Not as debtor and creditor, but as fathers would someday teach their children to do. Life slowly returned to normal. Kiona opened a small healing lodge beside Willow Creek. Anyone was welcome. Apache. Settler. Traveler. It didn't matter. Sani transformed the old church into the valley's first bilingual school. Children learned Apache. English. History. Respect. Fear slowly disappeared from the next generation. Nita, however, left. Not forever. But long enough to discover whether the road she wanted was truly her own. She spent months guiding trading caravans through the mountains. Protecting isolated families. Leading rescue parties during snowstorms. Every decision belonged to her alone. Every mile reminded her of one truth. She no longer traveled because of a promise. She traveled because she chose to. Autumn arrived. Then winter. Finally. Spring returned. Exactly 1 year after the bridge had been saved. A lone rider appeared on the road leading toward Caleb's ranch. Dusty lifted his head first. Caleb looked up from repairing a fence. Nita. She dismounted slowly. No Apache council accompanied her. No father. No ceremony. Only one woman. Walking her own path. She stopped a few feet away. I've crossed enough miles. I finally know the answer. Caleb set down his hammer. And what is it? She smiled. The first time I came, I carried my father's promise. The second time, I carry my own. She stepped closer. I don't owe you my life. I don't owe you marriage. I don't owe you anything. She gently took his hand. I simply love you. Caleb looked into her eyes. The uncertainty that had lived between them for so long quietly disappeared. He reached beneath his shirt. The leather cord with 3 turquoise stones still rested there. He untied it. Then carefully removed 2 stones. One he placed into Kiona's hand. One into Sani's. The final stone remained on the cord. He placed it around Nita's neck. This one was never payment. It was hope. Then, for the first time, he knelt. Not before an obligation. Not before a tradition. But before the woman who had freely chosen to stand beside him. Nita. Will you build the rest of this life with me? As my equal? Tears filled her eyes. Yes. Their wedding took place beside the very bridge that had nearly been destroyed. No walls separated the guests. Apache drums echoed beside cowboy fiddles. Children from both communities scattered wildflowers across the path. Kiona stood beside her sister. Not only as family, but as the healer who had protected both communities. Sani read a blessing. First in Apache. Then in English. Every person understood every word. Sheriff Owen smiled. So, what do we call this bridge now? An elderly rancher answered before anyone else could. Freedom Crossing. No one disagreed. Years passed. Travelers entering the valley always noticed the same 3 places. The healing lodge. The schoolhouse. The ranch that never turned away anyone caught by storms. Inside that ranch, above the fireplace, hung the leather cord with 3 turquoise stones. Not as a reminder of a debt, but as a reminder that 3 frightened girls had once survived a fire. And 3 remarkable women had later taught an entire frontier the true meaning of freedom. On quiet evenings, Caleb and Nita watched their children race across Freedom Crossing while Kiona treated a traveler nearby and Sonny laughed with a classroom full of boys and girls speaking both languages without fear. The valley had changed forever. Not because one cowboy saved 3 Apache girls, but because, years later, he refused to let gratitude become chains. And in doing so, he gave every one of them the greatest gift of all: the freedom to choose love.